Three, two, one. Let's see, something's not right. There we go. Okay, so good evening and welcome to lesson number 3. This is a very sensitive topic. We're going to be talking about pregnancy in general, but specifically we're going to be talking about when pregnancy needs to be or seemingly needs to be stopped or ended prematurely. And it's a sensitive topic for a number of reasons. The first one is legitimate, the second one not legitimate, but legitimate for our purposes. It's a sensitive reason because many people have to grapple with this question, whether personally, family, friend, and therefore it's a sensitive issue. It's also sensitive because it's become a very political issue, and politics in general have become very sensitive. And so these are generally good enough reasons for me to shy away from tackling the issue publicly. However, you're here tonight not to hear what I think about it, because I have the same right to have an opinion as you do. But you're here tonight to hear what does the Torah, if the Torah has a view or an opinion on this sensitive issue. So I want to make clear that the conclusions we will come to today are not meant to be the rabbi's advice for the political resolution of this question. Not necessarily will the outcome of this class mean that this is what the law of the land should be. It's important to keep that in mind. As we mentioned last week, specifically in the week before as well, each case is very specific and needs to be taken specifically, and the same applies to the question of tonight. So let's get on with the question. I will present a short clip, and then we'll try to discuss and see what we can come up with.
Shtisel is a highly popular, multiple award-winning Israeli television series about a fictional family living in a fervently religious Jerusalem neighborhood. Two of its characters, who go by the stage names of Ruhami and Hanina, are depicted as a young couple. Ruhami becomes pregnant, but at 21 weeks, she is hospitalized for acute shortness of breath. Ruhami is informed that she has been diagnosed with pulmonary arterial hypertension, a rare disease, dangerously exaggerated by her pregnancy. She is told that to save her own life, the doctors must remove her baby, which will almost certainly not survive.
ההיריון מסכן את החיים שלך. גם עכשיו הוא מסכן את החיים שלך, ובכל שעה נוספת הסכנה גדלה. המלצה של הרופאים במקרה שלך זה חד משמעית. צריך להפסיק את ההיריון כמה שיותר מהר ולהלד אותך.
But Ruhami would rather take her chances.
אני לא מוכנה.
זאת הדרך היחידה להבטיח לך שתישארי בחיים.
לא, ממש לא. אני לא מוכנה, אני רוצה לחזור הביתה ולהמשיך.
Hanina does not want to lose his wife. Her life should take precedence, but Ruhami insists on choosing otherwise. Hanina reaches for his cell phone.
אנחנו רוצים להתייעץ עם הרב שלנו.
Thankfully, that scene was simply an act. But how do you think a rabbi might respond to a similar, real-life drama? Does Jewish law support a mother's choice to voluntarily risk her life for the sake of offering her fetus a chance of survival?
Okay, anyone familiar with this show? Shtisel? No?
Watched a couple.
Oh, he's saying it's difficult to watch these types of shows. Anyhow, it was very popular a couple of years ago, a year or two ago, maybe three, maybe a little more. Anyhow, so it's a fictional story. I didn't see the show. I believe the beginning of the story is that in this fictional story is that she knew she wouldn't be able to carry a baby medically. She wouldn't be able to be pregnant, or it was too dangerous for her to be pregnant. So they decided they're going to go surrogacy. And she would just show as if she would, show as if she's pregnant so that everyone would think she's pregnant. And then when the baby would come, no one would know she didn't actually give birth. And without telling her husband, she became pregnant and ended into this life and death situation. The end of the show is that she didn't go ahead with the abortion and they both survived, but it's a make-believe world. So that part of the story is really not relevant. The relevant part is, and we didn't address the question, is abortion permitted? The question is a woman allowed to choose the life of the child over her own? Not is she obligated to, is she allowed to?
I thought that the mother's life is more important.
Right. But if your life was in danger and I had the opportunity to save it, I would go and save it, right? What if my life would be at risk to save your life? Would I be obligated to put my life at risk?
No.
But can I choose to do that? So can she choose to put so
Why not?
fine. So what you just said was not relevant to this question specifically. You're just making a statement why she wouldn't have to do this. Why she shouldn't?
Why she should choose to have the pregnancy done.
So she shouldn't be allowed to risk her life for the sake of the baby's life.
She should be allowed.
She should be allowed, she can do that.
You're saying because she has free choice. Okay.
Just because you can.
Should the Torah, right?
Yeah.
The question is,
That's the big issue.
does the Torah allow her? Remember, you're here tonight to hear would the Torah allow her to risk her own life? The Torah would allow her to. I understand. My question is, what do you think?
I think Mark's been pretty good with the life of the mother supersedes the fetus, and that at the minimum, it would be severely frowned upon for her to do it. Now, is she allowed to beyond that? I'm not sure, but
She's allowed to the same way Jews allowed to go eat pork. A Jew can make a choice whatever they want.
she breaks the law.
Oh, so that, hold on.
Isn't the preferred choice for sure.
But if she would go to a rabbi, you can imagine if she would go to a rabbi, or if you were a rabbi and she would ask, am I allowed to? I insist on doing this. I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I went through it. I want to risk my life for the sake of this pregnancy. You would basically say that if this is your choice, you're allowed to do it. That's what you would say. Okay, perfect. Anyone else? Or anyone that disagrees with this and says she shouldn't be allowed to?
Logically, are you allowed to go save someone even if it puts your life in danger?
It depends.
Then I would think the same. Yeah.
It depends. What would what would you think it depends on?
Because in my head, if the baby can't live outside of her body at this point, every day that she's in jeopardy, the baby's in jeopardy too. Because
Right.
if she dies, the baby dies too, and then you lose both.
And in the example of risking your life for another life, it's already considered a lot of life. In this case, that's not, depending on what week she's at,
Okay.
let's assume it's under 7 months. It's different if it's under 7 months, and it's different if it's over 7 months.
Where's 7 months come in? You saying viability?
Viability is a factor.
Today viability is a factor.
I would say viability is a factor.
So you're assuming that.
I'm assuming that viability is a factor.
Okay.
It's just that's when this baby,
Yes.
they have the before it.
Today,
She's smart.
how old? About how old was she born? Today viability is much lower than 7 months, but we'll soon see viability is probably the thing that's taken least into consideration in Jewish literature. Yes, we have 1 minute on Zoom.
Yes,
Was-
I think that the woman should not be able to have a choice if she has other children. I think that also plays a role.
Okay.
If she has children, then she owes the children that are here now, I guess, the obligation to take care of them. So in that
Very interesting.
scenario, I don't think she should. But
Okay,
that's as far
that's
as
a
I
very
go.
interesting take. Very good. No, that's a very interesting take. In other words, she can give up her own life or comforts, but if she's already a mother, she has a responsibility to other children. She doesn't have the right to take away their mother, basically.
Going back to last week,
Yeah,
the question of declining painful medical treatment.
yeah.
Was a yes, yes, no? And if I remember, you talked about the no being the majority opinion,
That you can't decline.
that you cannot decline painful medical treatment. I mean, I'm looking.
No, well, according to some, you can decline painful medical.
Sorry, according to some, you can.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that come into play here as well?
Okay, so I want to point out that the opinions that last week were extreme to either end, the same opinions are going to be on the extreme on the other end.
Yeah.
The reason is, can you guess the reason? No. Because the rabbis don't base their opinion on what they think or on something that a conclusion they've come to. It's based on what the Torah says. So if in one case the Torah says pro-life 100%, but in the other case the Torah says pro-choice 100%, that's what the rabbi is going to do. It's not that the rabbi becomes pro-life and therefore in every case we're going to do. So the same two rabbis that we discussed last week, one saying you have to do anything, you have to get onto a ventilator, you have to take every extreme measure, is going to say this week he's going to be on the other side. It's going to reverse.
Because from what I understand, fetus does not become alive until it leaves the womb.
Well, let's see. Well, we'll see.
Because that would be just like I think was
Well, we'll see because that's not that might play into the reason, but the reason is that they're basing it on how they understand the Torah, and
then live.
100%.
In every life, you gotta eke out every ounce of every life. But when life begins, will be equally as hard.
Yeah, but that would explain this question. What about general abortion, where the mother's life isn't at risk?
I think the Torah's clear in that.
So I'm telling you, the rabbis from last week are on the opposite ends. Okay, let's delve in a little and see what's going to happen here. So the first step to evaluate what the Torah has to say is going to be to look at the Torah. So let's look at the Talmud text 1 in Tractate Nida. Fascinating tale of what happens in the womb while everyone's anxiously awaiting for the 9 months to be up. A fetus inside its mother's womb resembles a folded writing tablet. Its 2 hands rest on its temples, its 2 elbows rest on its knees, its heels rest against its buttocks, and its head lies between its knees. Its mouth is closed and its navel is open. It eats what its mother eats, drinks what its mother drinks, and produces no excrement. This is a healthy baby. There are babies that do excrete, and that's not a healthy situation. A lamp burns above its head, and it sees from one end of the world to the other. The fetus is taught the entire Torah. However, as the fetus emerges into the world, an angel approaches and strikes its mouth, causing it to forget the entire Torah. When we were kids, we were told that's why you have a little indent on your upper lip. That's from the angel
Telling you to
erasing your memory. The fetus does not emerge before it is made to take an oath. What is the content of the oath? Be righteous and not wicked. Okay, so before we begin analyzing this passage, does this passage shed any light on whether a fetus should be considered a human life? How? Or what's the impression why are you getting that impression?
The impression I would get is that the moment life begins is when you forgot the whole Torah. Because before that, you knew the whole Torah, so nobody comes into the world knowing the Torah. If every fetus has been taught the entire Torah, life cannot begin unless you forgot the Torah.
Okay, so let's see. The Talmud uses this term. The first paragraph is the Talmud just describing what the fetus looks like. Then the Talmud says, a lamp burns above its head and it sees from one end of the world to the other. What exactly does that mean? Then the Talmud goes on to say, the fetus is taught the entire Torah. However, it forgets it. What does that mean? First of all, what's the point? If it's being taught, if it's going to be made to forget it, what's the point of teaching it? And if you're teaching it, why are you trying to forget it? And number 3, these are the 3 points that we're going to analyze of this passage. It says that the fetus takes an oath before it emerges, that it will be righteous and not wicked. This is the opening of the Tanya. The whole Tanya opens with this phrase. So, what does it mean a lamp burns above its head? So many passages in the Talmud, in this Agadic type of Talmud, are not to be taken literally, obviously. There's no lamp inside the mother's stomach standing on top of the baby's head. And the mother isn't walking around with a candle for 9 months. So what does it mean? Obviously, it's a metaphor. What's the metaphor? We know that Ner Hashem, the candle of God, it says in the verse, is Nishmat Adam, the soul of man. In other words, the soul of a person is compared to a candle. So therefore, what we're saying here is a fetus in its mother's womb has a soul. It has a soul that's unique to it. Now, a fetus is taught the entire Torah, just as 9 months of gestation is meant for the body to develop in a way that will allow it to live a good life physically. Because there's already a soul, the soul also needs to develop in a way that it'll be able to live a spiritually healthy life. And therefore, the fetus is taught the entire Torah. This is part of what helps it get ready to enter into the world. Now, it's made to forget the Torah, right? Because if it would enter the world with the Torah, it wouldn't be a struggle. It wouldn't have a problem. However, when a Jew learns the Torah, he's only remembering something they already learned once. So when you learn something as a child, then you learn it again when you're elderly, even if you haven't thought about it for 60 years, and even if you totally forgot it, when you learn it again, a light bulb goes up. Now I remember that, right? So when a Jew learns Torah, they are remembering something they already learned when they were in utero. And this is a discussion that goes into a convert. Yeah, the soul of the convert, when does the soul of the convert learn the Torah? And that's why it says that really the convert, right, when the Talmud says a convert that converts. Why a convert? Because even when he wasn't Jewish, he had the soul of a convert. In other words, together with his non-Jewish, or with his animal soul, with his human soul that he's had as a non-Jew, he had, at least in potential, the soul of a convert that was with him in utero, that studied the entire Torah.
Is that true only of converts, or does every soul study the entire
So every Jew, only Jews have the godly soul that studies Torah. The question is, the person who wasn't Jewish and now converts, when did their soul study Torah?
Okay.
A non-Jewish soul doesn't study Torah. At least that's not what the Talmud is discussing. Maybe it does. The Talmud is addressing Jews, so that's what the Talmud is talking about. Now, it says that the last thing is the fetus does not emerge before it's made to take an oath. The word for made to take an oath in Hebrew, anyone knows what the word is for oath? Shavua. Shavua. So the word is mashbi'im. If you take that same word, mashbi'im, and you change one letter, but you don't even change the letter. You change the dot that's on top of the letter, which in the Torah there are no dots. So instead of mash be'im with a shin, you change it to a sin. And again, in the Torah, the word is the same. So instead of mash be'im, you say mas be'im. The word sova means satiated. So the simple meaning of the Talmud is that the soul is made to swear before it enters the world, it will be a tzaddik and not a rasha. Siddur explains that it's not just meant to swear, oh, I promise I'll do it. Together with the oath, God satiates it. It gives it all the power it needs to actually fulfill this. Must be him. It fills it up. So in other words, this idea of teaching the soul Torah is connected with giving it enough power and energy to go through life like a Jew.
And that happens at birth,
Hmm?
that happens at birth, deal?
Yes, but right before birth. So the underlying perspective that we take from this Talmud is that a fetus is not just a lump of cells. There's a soul connected to this body that is taught the whole Torah, is made to swear an oath, is given a lot of potential to fulfill this oath. And this baby is preparing for a life with a mission. And it's almost like
What is the Hebrew word for the fetus? Don't they call it just with child? Mother is with child? What is the Hebrew?
ubar,
Say fetus.
ubar.
What does that mean? What does it translate? Child?
No,
Middle shape. Is that-
you don't understand. Ubar means uberet means pregnant. Ubar with what? Pregnant with the ubar, with the pregnant.
Okay, so
You're asking to translate literally a Hebrew word, not necessarily is there a literal translation that applies in English.
so there's something with the.
But it's not child. That's yelad, that's vlad, that's birth. Yelad comes from the word holada, which means to birthed. So a child, the Hebrew word for child would only be used for a child after they're born.
Does the fetus that miscarries
Yes.
have the first 2 inches, not the third? Or is it totally different for a fetus that was the term?
I don't know. In other words, you're asking when during the 9 months is the fetus taught, is the soul taught the Torah? I don't know. One thing is for sure, if the child is not born alive, then there's no there are certain things that aren't done because that child that fetus hasn't become a human being, hasn't become a child. So you don't sit shiva, you don't do a regular burial.
Some of that.
It depends how they're born. In other words, if they're born alive and what happens afterwards. What happened?
Well,
They were born alive and like regular.
everybody thought, yeah, but
So then not necessarily. It depends. It depends. There's a lot of variables. A lot of variables. So if you think about it like this, when a person's thinking, should I have a child? Yeah, there are many considerations, many things that go into that, making that consideration. But once you decide to have the child, once the child's born, no one's thinking anymore. Maybe I should get rid of the child, right? By God, there's no difference between potential and actual. When God thinks something or God says something, it happens. There is no difference between something might happen, could happen, and does happen. So for God, once the potential for the child is there, once there is a fetus with a soul, that's already a form of actualization. It isn't any more potential. So the soul already needs to learn Torah and needs to do everything a person needs to do. So a fetus isn't a simple matter. It's not just a lump of cells, right? That isn't a human being yet. It's just a part of the body. However, this same text seems to imply that the fetus isn't yet a human being. Because although it implies that it's not just a lump of cells, it's more, it looks more like a human being than not, but at the same time, it's not. The first sentence, a lump burns above its head, not in its head or not in its body. It's above, it's separate. It's not part of his body yet. Yeah. And this is very important that they remain sort of two distinct entities. It eats what its mother eats, right? It drinks what its mother drinks, etc. It's not independent. It's totally reliant on the mother. And even the statement the fetus is taught the entire Torah shows how dependent it is. It doesn't study Torah. It doesn't learn the Torah. It's taught. It's given the whole Torah. Yeah, it doesn't learn Torah. And it's important because an essential part of being a human being is to be independent. And that's what happens. It takes a long time for this potential baby to turn into an independent. It takes 9 months. What's the most significant jump in the process from conception to the baby becoming a baby, to the baby becoming a human being? What's the most significant jump? Is it the moment of conception or the moment of birth? So it's the moment of, well, the moment of birth, the moment of conception has a lot of ways this thing can go. And if the baby is lost any time before the moment of birth, it wasn't really a baby yet. The most significant jump, now you'll say creating something from nothing, that's the most significant turn. But the most significant turn, if you were to take out the fetus a few days after conception, you would have nothing. Yeah, the most significant change from being a fetus to being a human being is the moment of birth. This is why birth brings out from parents or from anyone, from any human being that witnesses or experiences birth, brings out a tremendous joy. And what's the joy? Why do we celebrate a birthday every year? Why is the baby so excited on their birthday? Why are we so excited for someone else's birthday? What happens when the baby is born? They become independent. They become a human being that can now affect the world, that can now change the world, that can now accomplish something in the world. And because of this deficiency that a fetus has, that it doesn't have independence, it also doesn't have a soul, its own soul, right? It eats everything it has, its life comes from the mother. Its own soul is sitting above its head. It has a soul that's associated with it, but it's not fetuses yet. It hasn't been connected to the body yet. Because of this, a birth becomes a tremendously exciting event, a time for the baby. We know that although the soul doesn't complete its integration with the body until bar bat mitzvah, but the most significant step is taken at the moment of birth, more specifically for a boy at the age of 8 days old when he's circumcised. A girl, it says, is born circumcised, so that happens at the moment of birth, whereas the boy has to be circumcised, and therefore it takes 8 days. But this is so we have both elements here. We have, on the one side, the Talmud seems to imply that the fetus is pretty as close to human as possible, but at the same time, seems to imply that it's not yet a human being. Yeah, so far so good. Let's look at text 2, and let's see if we can decipher what this text means. Very cryptic verse that I'll tell you now is taken very differently by Christians and Jews. If men are embroiled in an altercation, this is page 100, and a blow lands on a pregnant woman, okay? So, and it's important, the case study here is important. In other words, it's not a man is in a fight with a woman. Because if she's the intended target, that may be here. Two men are fighting. A woman happens to get in the way, and a blow lands on this pregnant. One of the men hit this pregnant woman, and her fetuses emerge. Okay, and there is no tragedy. The perpetrator must certainly be punished. What's the punishment? Through providing restitution in accordance with the judge's orders. If, however, there is a tragedy, you must provide a life for a life. Okay, so now we have on page 101, we have 3 questions and 2 options to each question. And let's take a moment and go through each one and see where we all stand when taking apart this verse. Okay, what is the meaning of the phrase, her fetuses emerge and there is no tragedy? What do you think that means? Option A is the fetuses and the mother survive. So the fetuses emerge and there's no tragedy. Option B, huh?
Why is fetuses and not fetus?
Because that's what the verse says. Is your question if there's only one fetus, if it makes a difference? That's the translation of the words in the verse.
She's pregnant with twins.
That's the implication of the verse. It doesn't make a difference halachically, practically, but that's how the verse states the thing. Okay, so the fetuses emerge and there's no tragedy. Option A is that the fetuses and mother survive. Option B is the mother survives but the fetuses die. By raise of hand, who thinks that when the verse says there is no tragedy, it means option A, that everyone survived? Okay, who thinks it means option B? I can't see Zoom, so we'll have to take no. So everyone thinks option A. Yeah, okay. Number 2, the perpetrator must certainly be punished through providing restitution. What is the basis for this restitution? Notice if everyone survived, what's the what are you paying for? Option A, provoking a premature but healthy birth. In other words, the babies now could have maybe developed more, you caused pain or other things involved, but you're not paying for any damages. No one, right, they're healthy. There was no tragedy. Or option B, causing the death of the fetuses. So whoever said option A before is going to have to choose option A this time. And whoever chose option B is going to have to go with option B. Number 3, what is the meaning of the phrase, if there is a tragedy, you must provide a life for a life? If there is a tragedy means if the fetuses die, the assailant receives the death penalty. Or option B, if the mother dies, the assailant receives the death penalty.
Either A or B.
Okay, so if you said A up until now, then when it says if there is a tragedy, how could you say B? In other words, if up until now the fetuses are both healthy, and now you're saying the mother dies, wait, what happened to the fetuses?
No, there's a
But no harm was caused. You're saying if there's a tragedy means the fetuses die. In other words, if you chose A, if you said that the first half of the verse means that there was no tragedy, means no one died, and you chose option A for number 1, then number 2 and number 3 are going to have to be option A as well.
actually 3 doesn't apply, because if the fetuses die, the assailant receives death penalty unless they die after they were born perfectly healthy.
Why? Who told you? Wait, everything you know about abortion in Torah, you don't know now. Now we're
If they were born, if you said A,
yeah.
this and the mother survived, then A down there doesn't apply either. If
Sure.
fetuses die, unless they die after being.
No, because no, the verse says if there's no tragedy, then you have to pay. But if there is a tragedy, then you have to give a life for a life. In other words, if there is a tragedy means what? What was the tragedy
Either one dies.
if either one dies?
Double death penalty if you cause double death.
There's no such thing as a double death penalty. But you're saying,
He's born, we're saying that is a baby, that is a human being. We're not.
yeah, but then the baby didn't die.
But they're saying if there's tragedy, that tragedies can happen with premature.
One second.
Maybe the mother would have died. Maybe.
Okay. I understand. Yeah. No, if the baby is born healthy, then the tragedy didn't happen.
Well, it's been these for 5, 6 weeks, so you.
No, okay, but yes, yes. But that's not because you can't see the verse inside, you're not remembering everything else the verse said. One second.
It seems to me that the key is that if however there's a tragedy, you must provide. That would only be the mother. You have any damages.
So you're saying you're using your logic that you can't see the death penalty for a tragedy happening to the unborn fetuses, and therefore it must be talking about the mother who the tragedy happened to. So the verse isn't so basically what you're saying is that you're saying the verse is only addressing. Well, you were consistent. The first half of the verse is talking about where the fetuses died, and the second half of the verse is talking about where the mother died. Everyone who chose option A for 1 and 2 and option B for 3, then the verse doesn't address what happens if the fetuses die. Because the first half of the verse is talking about there's no tragedy, so no one died. The second half of the verse is talking about where the mother died. So what happens if the babies die? Yeah, but where does it say that? The Torah says you pay money if there's no tragedy. Oh, it seems that the Torah doesn't address it. Yeah. Okay. So what emerges is you have to choose either A or B for all of these things. Option A is going to be that the fetus equals human life. And therefore, if the fetuses are not lost, in other words, they survive, you only have to pay a monetary fine for inducing labor or anything else any other pain that's associated with it. And if the fetuses die, then that's the death penalty. Okay? That's option A. Option B is that the fetus is not human life. And therefore, if the fetuses if the fetuses died, in other words, the assumption is the verse is talking about a case where some tragedy happened. But so when the verse says that a tragedy didn't happen, it means the mother didn't die. Because if a person gets the death penalty and a fine, he doesn't pay a fine. Okay, this is the rule in halacha. If you are punished, if you deserve 2 punishments, a financial penalty and a death penalty, you don't pay the financial penalty because you're going to be killed. So you're absolved of your financial penalty. So in the first case where the fetuses die, but the mother survived, and therefore there's no death penalty, therefore there's a financial penalty because the mother lost the babies. Wait till you hear the class, okay? Don't guess. Because if everyone guesses, then we're not going to get anywhere. If the mother doesn't die, therefore there's no death penalty, but the fetuses did die, therefore there's a financial penalty. But if the mother did die, if there is a tragedy and the mother died, now there's a death penalty. So there's no. Just stop. Don't keep on saying it because it just ruins there's no such thing as a double death penalty. Forget about it. It doesn't exist in Judaism. We're talking from a Torah perspective. There's no such thing. There's no life in prison. There's no such thing in Judaism as life in prison. And there's no such thing as double death. Take my word for it. You want to argue about it? You can argue about it later. So if the fetuses survive, the verse isn't even talking about the fetus, because if the fetuses survived, what are we talking about? If everyone survived, what happened? Someone was a little uncomfortable, or the babies but no tragedy happened. They survived. They're living, and therefore there's nothing to talk about. The verse is talking about if there was a tragedy, or if there wasn't a tragedy, means if the mother died or not. Okay, these are the 2 ways of understanding this verse. And the question is does the fetus equal human life or not? Okay. Option A is the position of, I don't know much about Christianity, but I know that there are definitely certain groups within Christianity that choose translating this verse as option A. And therefore, abortion is murder in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't matter what the scenario is, because fetus equals human life, and therefore there's no way out of it. Can you ever justifiably kill a human being? No. Okay. I understand. Please, could you do me a favor and just wait till after class? Thank you. Don't try. Please do it. Okay. Thank you. Every human being has inherent value, and if a fetus equals human life, there is no option to avoid it. However, Jewish tradition does not follow option A. We follow option B. The fetus does not equal human life. And therefore, you cannot get the death penalty for abortion. In Judaism, there is no death penalty for abortion. You might come to the conclusion that therefore, abortion is not a problem. That's not true either. Let's look at text 3 from the Talmud again. If on Shabbos, a woman sitting on a birth stool dies before she was able to deliver her child, they should fetch a knife and cut open her womb to extract the child. Okay? So the Talmud objects, but that statement is obvious. There is no prohibition against cutting flesh on Shabbat. On Shabbos, we have a prohibition against cutting a living person's flesh, because then you're extracting blood. And that's prohibited on Shabbos. Slaughtering is prohibited on Shabbos. But here you have a case where the mother died. Cutting flesh, in other words, now that she's dead, cutting her flesh isn't the prohibition anymore. So the Talmud's trying to figure out what in the world is the Mishnah saying? Of course you're allowed to open the mother on Shabbos. There's no problem here. So Rabbah responded, the statement is necessary to permit the fetching of the knife by way of a public thoroughfare, which is prohibited on Shabbos. In other words, yes, you're allowed to cut the flesh of a dead person on Shabbos, but you need a knife to cut the flesh with. Let's say you're in your house, you don't have a knife sharp, you don't have a scalpel in your house, you have a few butter knives, so you don't have a knife that's sharp enough to perform a C-section, and you run across the street to your neighbor's house, but in order to do that, you have to pass through a public thoroughfare. Carrying from the house to a public domain is a biblical prohibition. That, you would say, is you're not allowed to do on Shabbos unless it's to save a life. And this unborn child isn't alive yet, as we saw. Yeah. So the Talmud says, no, you're allowed to do that. Wait. So now it seems like it is a life. You're allowed to desecrate the Shabbos. So to save a life, we are obligated to desecrate the Shabbos. So here for this fetus, we have a pretty clear indication that the Torah considers this fetus as close to life as possible, close enough that you desecrate the Shabbos to save it. But at the same time, it's not a complete life, because you wouldn't get the death penalty if you murdered. We'll use that term just to bring out, if you murdered a fetus, you wouldn't get the death penalty. So is it murder or not? Is it a life or not? Well, it's not here nor there. It's as close to life as you can get, enough that you're allowed to desecrate the Shabbos to save it, and yet it's not a full life, because there's no death penalty if you kill the fetus.
To save a potential life, I mean, I don't see it explicitly, but I mean, that seems to make sense that
you should be
potential life, so close to a potential life that be worthy of desecrating the
the rule in the Torah is that for life you desecrate Shabbos, not potential life. If you're saying potential life is life, then then
It can't
you,
be for- It can't be for life and potential life?
Like you.
it could be if the Torah wanted it to be, but the Torah said you're allowed to desecrate the Shabbos to save a life.
What about this was name?
We're not talking about that. No,
So
Yeah.
if it wasn't a viable life, let's say it was in 3 months.
Okay.
versus 7, would you still be allowed to desecrate?
no,
So it has to be at the threshold.
yeah, and this is the point of the Mishnah. It says to extract, and here it says Vlad, the child. In other words, what they're extracting is not Uber anymore, it's the child, because once the baby stays, so it has to be something, at least presumably, there's reason to assume the baby could potentially live on its own.
Kicking, big belly.
Well, you don't know that because you may not know the pregnant, or you may just see her on the side of the road, and you don't know if the baby. But even for the potential, you go for it, even if you're not sure. Now, if you cut open and you see that the baby's dead or it isn't possible, then you stop right there. But if there's even potential, then you go ahead.
Batch of potential.
Yeah, yes. No, but what I'm saying is, yeah, but the Torah needs to teach this to us.
No, great, but it's.
That's what the Talmud's teaching us, that even for potential life, you can do it. But the Talmud has to teach that to us because the Torah doesn't say that otherwise. No, you're right. You do violate the Shabbos for the potential life, but we wouldn't know that.
The rubble. You
Exactly.
know there's a body underneath.
Exactly.
For the possibility that there
But-
might be.
But the reason why this is not obvious from there is because there was a potential life, or there was a full life, and you're not sure. Here, there was never yet a full independent life. But you're right. It
This
is
still seems to-
100%, 100%.
The
But-
possibility of life is worth bringing the Shabbos.
Sure.
Even if you don't know if there's anybody underneath, the potential of any kind of life saving is worth.
Absolutely,
Even if the
absolutely.
life hasn't even been here.
Yes. Well, that's what this Mishnah teaches us. Yes. Now, are there exceptions to this rule? Are there exceptions to this rule?
Please do it.
So, text 4. If a woman experiences life-threatening difficulties during labor, we cut the fetus in her womb to extract it limb by limb. I know the Mishnah uses gruesome detail like this, and it doesn't usually, but to emphasize the gravity of what's happening, and at the same time, the importance of doing it. So the Mishnah doesn't want to take away from the gravity of what you're doing, and at the same time, so we do this because her life takes precedence over the fetus's life. Now, obviously, we're not talking about a case where the fetus could be saved through a C-section or other things. We're talking about this is the only option left. There is no other option. Now, for most of history, a C-section meant death for the mother, or at least much higher than 50%. C-section was death for the mother. And therefore, if the woman was having problems during labor, during childbirth, her life was in danger. There was no option of the C-section, and therefore the abortion was the route to go. Because today we do have the C-section option, in most cases, that danger to life is avoided. It can still happen, but it's much less likely than it used to be, right? And again, it doesn't matter here that it's 9 months or that it's the baby's fully developed. Doesn't matter. No difference between day 1 and day 270. How many days? 272, 273 days. There's no difference because her life, in other words, the mother's life, takes precedence over the fetus's life. Now, here we have. Let's look at the logic.
It's more important than the potential.
Let's look at some of the logic here. Let's look at the logic here. Let's look at Rashi in text 5. A midwife reaches into the womb with her hand to dismember the fetus and extract it limb by limb. 4, as long as the fetus has not emerged into the world, it is not a life. It is therefore permitted to kill it for the sake of saving the mother's life. Now, he also says, uses the word kill it. In other words, he's not saying that it's nothing, and therefore, but he's saying, compared to the mother's life, this is not life. And therefore, there's no problem to go in and do whatever necessary to save the mother's life. This is what how Rashi understands the logic behind text 4. However, there is an opposing view to Rashi as to how to understand the logic for text 4. And this opposing view comes from the Rambam, from Maimonides in text 6. We are commanded to not take pity on the life of a rodef. A rodef is a murderous pursuer. In other words, you see someone with a gun chasing after someone else, an innocent person, or someone without a gun, and they want to kill them. So we are commanded not to take pity on the person chasing. So if you see someone chasing someone else with the intent to kill, you're not allowed to have mercy on him. Now, if that is necessary to rescue the intended victim, in other words, if you're driving your car and you see someone doing that, you can run the guy over and not kill him, just incapacitate him. You have to do that. You can't just take out your gun and shoot him first. But if you're not in a car, or if there's no way of getting to him, there's no way of stopping him besides killing him, we have an obligation to kill this intended murderer, this person who is trying to kill. On this basis, our sages ruled that if a woman experiences life-threatening complications during labor, it is permitted to abort the fetus in her womb with drugs or with an instrument. For the fetus is considered a form of rodef against the mother. So, when reading Rashi and Rambam, Maimonides, we see two major differences between them. Rashi states the fetus is not a life yet. Yeah? The Rambam doesn't make this point. The Rambam doesn't speak about the status of the fetus. Doesn't say whether it's a human or not, whether it has life or not. Rambam has to learn from a rule of rodef in the Torah of this intended murderer to exempt or to allow the doctors to abort the fetus, because now the fetus is considered a rodef. He's considered a potential murderer. So we're allowed to take his life first. Whereas Rashi makes no mention of this principle at all. Why? Why the difference between Rashi and Rambam? So Rashi reasons that a fetus, although it may be as close to life as you can get, at the end of the day, the fetus doesn't have a life, isn't a life yet. And therefore, we don't need this rule of rodef to allow abortion. If the mother's life is in jeopardy, just like anyone else's life is in jeopardy, you do anything necessary for their life. You're not taking a life here to protect the mother because the fetus isn't a life yet. Because the fetus isn't a life yet, there's no problem to do the abortion. We don't have to overcome a burden of permission. Yeah, just like you're allowed to do a surgery, right? You're allowed to cut open a person's body. You're allowed to remove body parts, play around with body parts to save their life. You're allowed to go inside the woman and take out whatever is potentially risking her life. Maimonides, on the other hand, assumes that the fetus is a life. And therefore, just because the mother's life is in danger doesn't mean that you should be allowed to kill the fetus. But the fetus is putting the mother's life in danger. The fetus is like a rodef. Therefore, we can apply the rules of rodef to it, and therefore, we can kill it. But we're killing a person.
Does rodef only apply to people?
Yes. But in what way? You saying if you see a person killing an animal, can you kill them?
So
No.
make sure that when we're saying rodef, we are only talking about human life, that we can't otherwise say that a life in general.
Yes.
Life in general versus just human life. Human
Correct. Correct.
life- We are mostly talking about human life for sure. That's-
Yes. Yes. The question is, why don't we say that the mother is endangering the child's life? Because now, you want to save the mother's health, because you want to save the mother's life, now you're going to kill the baby. If the baby is a full human being, why doesn't it work? But if you see two people pointing guns at each other, whose life do you take? You can't take a life in that scenario. If you see a scenario, we saw a road day, right? You see one person chasing after someone else with a gun. It's clear. You take the person's life who's holding the gun. What if you see two people pointing guns at each other? You don't do anything. You can't do anything. Here, you have the mother and the baby fighting for life. If, according to the Rambam, the baby's alive, why can you take the baby's life instead of the mother? Maybe you should take the mother's life. Maybe you should allow nature to take its course. And the answer is that even though Rambam says it's a life, but it's still not a life. And the proof is in the pudding. There's no death penalty. There's no death penalty for taking the baby's life. There's no death penalty. But at the same time, the Rambam goes much further than Rashi. Rashi says there's no life. And that's why you don't even need an excuse. Of course, you need an excuse. You need an excuse to do any type of surgery because you're saving someone's life. But of course, you need an excuse to have the abortion, but you don't need to have an excuse for killing someone because you're not killing someone. But according to the Rambam, where you are killing someone, you need an excuse for that. But at the same time, so the Rambam calls it ritzicha. The Rambam calls it murder. The Rambam calls abortion murder, but at the same time, there's no death penalty for it. But for all intents and purposes, the Rambam considers it murder, as close to murder as possible. Whereas Rashi says, no way. There's no life here. There's no human life here. And therefore, it's not a problem. Now, even Rashi thinks abortion is not a good thing. Even Rashi thinks abortion, minus the mother's life being in danger, is not something that we should be engaging in. However, one important distinction, so according to both Rashi and the Rambam, if the mother's life is in danger, are you allowed to kill the fetus or not? Yeah. So they both say you shouldn't do abortion, but if the mother's life is in danger, you're allowed to. So what's the difference? What's the difference between the two of them? They both say you're allowed to do it if the mother's life is in danger. And an example would be if the mother's life isn't in danger, but the baby's life is in danger, or there are major consequences to this. One example would be Tay-Sex, which used to be very common in Ashkenazic Jews. Today, it's not as common. You know why? Huh? Genetic testing? Yeah. When I was a yeshiva student, we went to get, they took our blood. They don't tell you if you're a carrier or not, because if one spouse is a carrier, only one spouse is a carrier, it doesn't get passed over. But before me and Sterne dated, before we even consider dating, once the name came up and it became something that's potential, you call up the database, you give them your number and the potential number of and they'll tell you, you can go ahead or don't. They don't tell you who's the carrier, who's not. You don't find out anything. Huh?
They tell you if you're.
What's the difference?
Exactly. What's the difference?
So why do you need to know? What's the difference?
You don't want to shame somebody.
So go take genetic, go do your own testing. You'll find out.
Go ahead. You're both carrying.
Huh?
If they tell you not to go ahead, you're both carrying.
Correct. If they tell you not to go ahead, then you know you're both. Yes, correct. Correct. But again, it doesn't matter because you can find someone that's not a carrier, and again, you've stopped the. Yeah.
Established that there is no penalty for a selective abortion. Is there any penalty involved?
Yes.
They selected, we're saying, like mother's life is in.
No.
No.
Any abortion. There's no death penalty for abortion of any kind. That's what the verse says. The verse says if there's a tragedy, that means the mother died. But if there's no tragedy, that means only this baby's died. There's a financial penalty. Today we don't have our courts don't have financial jurisdiction to give financial penalties. So today that doesn't exist. But in biblical times, if someone performed an abortion and there was no legal, you did it, in other words, the lady entered, you hit her an abortion, the court would evaluate the value of 2 fetuses or however many babies there were. I don't know how they would evaluate, maybe how they would be sold in the slave market. I'm not sure how they would evaluate the value of a baby, but whatever the value was, they would penalize the person.
I think that is left, even if our laws have changed. I don't think
This is nothing to do with modern laws. Today, Torah law cannot enforce a financial penalty. But the fetus's value isn't limited to financial penalty even when it was in place. It's just a penalty that the Torah prescribes. We're not saying the fetus is only worth this amount of silver or gold, but that's the penalty.
What is the penalty for selecting?
You're saying today,
Well,
a financial penalty.
just that financial.
In the verse, we say there's no death penalty.
Well, I know that there's other things that.
So biblically, there are 2 types of penalties. There's lashes, there's the death penalty or financial penalties. None of the death penalty doesn't apply to this. I don't think lashes would either, although it might. I don't think so. However, the court is allowed to administer any type of penalty if it feels necessary because of the times. And it's not as a Torah penalty, but as a societal penalty. So if the court decides that it's getting out of hand and we need to put a stop to it, they can decide to execute someone, but that wouldn't be the Torah law. That would be a societal need. The Torah doesn't prescribe a punishment for this besides the monetary punishment that we read. Not to derail the class, and I'm not going to take any questions on this, but you should just know that for a non-Jew to perform an abortion, there is the death penalty. Not by humans, but by God. Because for the 7 Noahide laws, there are no other penalties. The 7 Noahide laws have one penalty, death by heaven. Death penalty. So any of the 7 Noahide laws, even if though for most of them, for the Jew, there's no death penalty, but for the non-Jew, all of them have the death penalty. So it turns out, to perform an abortion, there's less problem for the Jew to perform the abortion than the non-Jew to perform the abortion. That's it. This is for the person performing the abortion. That's just a side note. Again, not to derail everything, but a little bit of trivia. Okay. So if the parents were around, and this happened all the time before the DNA testing, before the genetic testing, and they find out the fetus has Tay-Sex, are you allowed to abort? For those who don't know, Tay-Sex means that basically the baby doesn't develop, and within a few years the baby's dead. There's no potential for this baby. It's only a very short life of suffering. 3 years or 5 years? 5 years?
Thank you, Marcus Wilder.
Is it 5 years, you said? Yeah. 5 years. Anyway, a few years at best. At best, it's a few years, and it's so. What do we do? So this question came many times to rabbis in the last century. And let's see what Ramosha Feinstein has to say. Remember, last week, Ramosha Feinstein said that the only thing you have to give a patient at the end of life is food, water, and oxygen. You don't have to do any painful medications or any, again, assuming you're just prolonging life, you're not curing them. You don't need to go on a ventilator. You don't need to, even painful medications, you don't need to take. Yeah. Now let's see where he stands on this case. Text 7. Abortion is forbidden as an act of murder. The only distinction between abortion and the murder of an already born human is that one is not liable to receive the death penalty for killing a fetus. Okay? But don't let the punishment deceive you. You're going to think, oh, because there's no death penalty, therefore it's not murder. No, it is murder. The only instance in which abortion can be permitted is when it is necessary in order to save the life of the fetus's mother. And this applies even to a fetus that the doctors predict will only be able to survive for a few years, such as children born with Tay-Sachs disease. Even if the diagnosis tests that have recently been developed determine that the child will be born with this disease, it is forbidden to abort. Although this will cause great pain to the parents, nevertheless, since the mother's life is not endangered by the fetus, abortion cannot be permitted. We must acknowledge that God is directly in charge of all events, and we need to accept everything he does with love. Rabbi Feinstein maintains that since abortion is tantamount to murder, in his opinion, there's no room for leniency, even if in the tragic case of Tay-Sachs. Right? And the reason he holds this is because he follows the Rambam's view, right? He says it's for burden as an act of murder. He's taking the Rambam's approach that abortion is murder, and therefore the only way to allow it is if someone else's life is in danger, namely, in a fetus's case, the mother. However, according to Rashi, it's not murder, right? The fetus that is in only a state of potential because it's not born yet is not real life yet. So therefore, abortion is not really murder, according to Rashi. And according to this view, according to Rashi's view, there might be room to say, wait, maybe to avoid such pain and suffering for the child and for the parents and everyone involved, and only for a short amount of time, it's clear. It's not like there might be, you might have a happy life. There's no such thing. So if the test is positive, and therefore you're sure the emotional, psychological, everything, all the burdens that are brought by this, would be room, according to Rashi, it would seem, to allow for abortion. And Rabbi Waldenberg, who last week said that you have to do everything as long as there's a 50% chance that you have to do everything, you have to go all in, any type of medication, any type of ventilator, any type of measure, no matter how painful. Here, he says the opposite, or it seems to say the opposite. Text 8. You inquired about the permissibility of abortion in a case of Tay-Sachs disease, which can be diagnosed during pregnancy. The consequences of this disease are extremely severe and untreatable, and you asked whether this constitutes sufficient grounds to permit an abortion. After carefully considering all aspects of this issue, my conclusion is that in this unique case, where the consequences of continuing the pregnancy and bringing the child to term are so severe, it is possible to permit an abortion before the fetus reaches 7 months. I base this conclusion on the lengthy halachic analysis of the status of abortion that I published in Tzitz Eliezer, which presents the conclusion that abortion does not constitute an act of murder. After 7 months, abortion is a far weightier decision because at that stage, the fetus typically attains a state of viability.
And only a Jew could come to this conclusion.
Only a Jew can come to this conclusion.
Right. This does not apply to a Gentile. Or is that what?
Oh, not necessarily. Oh, you're saying
Police are excluding Jews in this.
is he saying this is exclusively for Jews?
This is the exclusively to Jews.
Anybody who's 5'6".
He doesn't say.
Anyhow, I don't know. Now, he doesn't say where his source is about viability. He doesn't say, and on the contrary, he says even after 7 months, if the question would come to him after 7 months, there might still be room for leniency. For some reason, he chose this 7 months. Again, many people differ with him. Now, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein was not happy. There's a back and forth, not back and forth between them, but when he saw this, he wrote scathing remarks about this, basically saying that he's allowing murder. But again, we understand Rabbi Moshe Feinstein is taking the position of Rambam, who calls it murder. Now, I have to say, throughout history, most halachic opinions followed Rashi. In other words, that it's not murder. However, today, most halachic authorities, just because of the way the world is and what Moshe Feinstein's position in the world was, I can't say most, but most follow Moshe Feinstein's attitude. Even if not 100%, they definitely follow his attitude. However, many follow Rabbi Waldenberg. It's not like last week that no one followed Rabbi Waldenberg, basically no one. It's not like that. So although most or many side with Rabbi Feinstein, at the same time, there definitely is a case-by-case thing that needs to be evaluated and needs to be dealt with and discussed. For example, many will be inclined to allow it early on in pregnancy. Not to get into the whole discussion here because, we'll spend a minute on it. The Jewish people in the land of Israel had what's called truma. If you had a field, you had to give a percentage. Well, you didn't have to give it, you had to give some of your first fruit to the priest. This fruit was called truma. This truma was holy food. Because it was holy, it was only allowed to be eaten by a priest or someone married to a priest, and it had to be eaten in ritual purity. Now, there are 24 gifts that we have to give to the priest. Many of those gifts are financial gifts. You give to the priest can give it to whoever he wants, he can sell it to whoever he wants, he can share it with whomever he wants. But truma must be eaten by a priest. What happens if there's a woman, she comes from an Israelite home. She comes from a priest. She's the daughter of a priest. As the daughter of a priest, she's allowed to eat truma. But then she marries a regular Jew like me. Because she marries an Israelite, she is no longer the daughter of a priest. In other words, she no longer has the status of a priest, she's still the daughter of a priest, but she doesn't have the halachic status of a priest. She loses it because she married in Israel. If the husband dies, what happens to her then? So it depends. If she has a child with this husband, the child keeps her because now she has a biological child that's an Israelite. She becomes an Israelite for life. Now, unless she marries a priest in her second marriage, she could get that status back. But she doesn't go back to her original status because she has something grounding her in the status. But if she has no children, then she goes back to her father's home. Oh, what happens? What happens if Jacob and Rachel? Jacob is an Israelite. Rachel is the daughter of a priest. They get married. Morning after the marriage, she wakes up and her husband's dead. What happens now? They don't have ultrasounds back then. She doesn't know if she's pregnant, but she might be. What do you have to do? Well, can she eat the truma or not? Does she go back to the status of a priest or not? So let's look at text 9. If a daughter of a Kohen married a non-Kohen and he died on the wedding night, she may immerse in the mikveh and eat truma that evening. Why are we not concerned that she may be pregnant? She may be pregnant. Chisda said she may eat truma until 40 days from her marriage. Because if she is not pregnant, there's no disqualifying factor. And if she is pregnant, till 40 days have elapsed, the embryo is mere fluid. That's a very interesting concept. In other words, it's a Talmud, Yevamos. What's the Talmud saying here? The Talmud is saying here a very interesting thing, a new thing, that for the first 40 days after conception, the embryo is merely fluid, mere fluid. And therefore, the fact that she has the potential of having a baby, for the first 40 days, that potential isn't even really being realized. To the extent that she can eat truma during those 40 days. Once 40 days pass, she has to stop and ensure that she's not pregnant. So, now today, most OBs count a pregnancy from the first day of the previous cycle. Judaism counts 40 days from the night of the wedding. The night of the wedding in a Jewish wedding would be the night after going to the mikveh. The mikveh is a minimum of 12 days after the beginning of the cycle, because the cycle you have to wait at least 5 days, plus 7 days, clean days before you can go to the mikvah. So the wedding night, so when we calculate, when we go to the in religious families, when you go to the OB and they want to know your due date, you have to take into consideration that they're doing their calculations. We know 12 days before anything was possible, or sometimes 13, 14 days before anything was. So we have to take that into consideration when calculating when the due date might be, because their due date is different than what our due date might be. So it would be, instead of 40 days, it would be like 52 days, 52 to 54 days after your so for the first 52 days after your medical due date, the fetus is considered like liquid and therefore fluid. And therefore, some halachic authorities who follow the Rambam's strict position that it's murder maintain that in the earliest stages of pregnancy, in other words, the first 40 days after conception, they would side with Rashi. In severe cases, it's 40 days after conception. So if you know when conception is, then it's 40 days. If you don't, then you assume 52 days after the last period. Again, it doesn't mean that abortion is now permitted during those 40 days. It means that the rabbis that maintain that abortion is murder will say, if an extreme case arises that it really makes no sense not to, in a severe case, if you get it within the first 40 days, there may be room to be lenient.
Is this rare case?
It's almost,
Something.
it depends according to who. It depends according to who.
Going to what was presented here as if for some reason you found out within that 40 days about this particular case, so you didn't know before, but you found out within that 40 days, are they saying within the 40 days you're allowed, or are they saying?
No one's saying it's allowed. According to some, it's allowed even if it's after 40 days. There are, so it's not all in the group. There are rabbis that would say that if you catch it within the first 40 days, they could see room to allow it. There is, so in other words, Rambam would say never, Rashi would say always, and because of this sort of a passage, oh, yeah, I see. Because of this, 1 second, Amy, or Scott. Because of this passage of the Talmud about 40 days, there'd be room to, so Rabbi Auerbach, who remember last week was also the middle ground between Rabbi Feinstein and Rabbi Waldenberg. So he applies this to abortion as well. However, Rabbi Feinstein clearly doesn't. And what Rabbi Auerbach would say, if a family came to him, he would say, instead of going to Rabbi Feinstein, go to Rabbi Waldenberg and ask him. However, Rabbi Feinstein would never send someone to Rabbi Waldenberg. But other rabbis may say, if a Syria, even if they're not inclined to follow a certain path, they may say, in this case, I think you should ask someone else. Yes, Scott or Amy.
So I'm looking for the big picture in this, and part of me says it seems like these different opinions by rabbis is similar to a child shopping their mother or father for the opinion that they want when they ask someone. So what is the big picture? Like, what does God want? Does God want us to see that there can't be unity in this, and that whatever happens, that someone's associated with Rabbi Feinstein, they're going to get that ruling. If someone's associated with the other rabbi, they're going to get that ruling. Like, what's the big picture? What does it mean?
Okay, so your question is I'm going to make an assumption, not about your question, but to where it leads. I'm going to assume you're asking for the person that's looking to do the right thing. So the concept of rabbi shopping is a concept. People do it. People do it. Not most people don't, but it's possible, right? You can find out which rabbi is the most lenient in each area and go to that rabbi. And however, someone who wants to do the right thing is going to want to live their life the way God wants them to live the life. On our own, we don't know because we're subjective. It's hard for us to determine, based on what the Torah says, how we should live our life. And that's why the Mishnah says 3 times, Asay lecha rav, make for yourself a rabbi. It doesn't say ask the rabbi, it says make a rabbi. In other words, a Jew from the moment they're born, subconsciously, but then from the moment they get older, consciously, has to look for a path in life that will set them on the road that God wants. And that is by finding a rabbi, and it could mean a rabbi as a teacher in the physical sense. It could be a school of thought in Torah for a rabbi that doesn't have but usually it means to find a congregation, a rabbi, and to follow them, to follow the rabbi, because the rabbi is guiding you and teaching you what the path of Torah is. So, taking this week as an example, the topic of this week, if you're going to follow Rabbi Feinstein this week, then you would follow Rabbi Feinstein last week. And if you're going to follow Rabbi Waldenberg last week, you're going to follow Rabbi Waldenberg this week. Now, you have Jews that are looking for the strict opinion in every case because they want to be sure, they want to live as holy a life as possible, so they're going to take the stringencies of everyone. But you'd be hard pressed to find someone that is looking for the leniencies of everyone. There are people that feel that they can't live up to a certain community. They're going to look to a community that's a little lower on the spectrum, but at the same time they're not going to go lower than that. In other words, they're going to follow the opinion all the way through. And they're going to constantly look for places to grow and to increase and improve. Is there a risk of it turning into a, you can go shopping for insurance, you go to like a general website and you find the cheapest quotes. Is it possible for it to turn into that? It's possible. It doesn't happen. And the reason it doesn't happen is because we're not looking for the easy way out. We're looking for the right path. And 1 minute. And in some of these cases, like last week, or even this week, you're talking life and death here. So just because you think you're being stringent by not allowing the abortion could end up causing major medical issues later down the line, emotional, it may even lead to physical harm. And then the other way around, if you're going to allow it, how do you know where that's going to lead to? So there's a lot of weighty stuff going around, and therefore people don't tend to usually look, just like you don't look for the doctor that's always going to give you the way out. You don't always look for the doctor that's going to make your life miserable. You also don't always look for the doctor that's going to give you the easy way out. So we trust that God trusts that people want to do what God wants and are going to look for the right approach. Again, is God leaving it open? Yeah, from the minute God destroyed the temple and the Sanhedrin was nullified, we don't have majority rule anymore. We don't have a one rule system. Every community does what the rabbis there have come up with according to Torah, obviously, and that's what we've got. That's what we've got. I hope that was a little helpful. Yes.
As a rabbi, you sometimes seek counsel for an opinion. You
Sure.
said it, right?
Sure.
You would ask. Do you always go to the same group of people then, or do you seek counsel from different voices?
So I have a rabbi that I turn to with all my questions. He's not an expert in all areas, but he'll tell me if this is not his expertise, I should go somewhere else. And he'll tell me who to go to. And I trust his opinion that he's giving me someone that I can trust or that I should trust.
You ever had maybe it doesn't apply, but where you said, oh, I know this is what I should counsel. This is what I should counsel, but you give a different opinion?
Why do I know that that's what I should counsel? Because that's what I was told, because that's what I believe the Torah says?
Because someone, or because another rabbi told you.
Well, I can't give a different counsel. I know that my counsel won't always be taken, won't always be acted upon, but I can't change that. I'll lose my job. No, it's not just I'll lose my job. I won't be true to who I am. And it's a challenge because in a lot of cases that come up, I've fortunately never had to deal with such weighty decisions. And it's not something I've ever had to choose. So do I know what I would choose to do in that scenario? I mean, I know that I'd ask my rabbi, I know what's right and wrong. Would I have? I hope that's what I work all my life to hopefully do. Hopefully I'll never have to. But yeah.
We're back at 8:30. I still wanted to know the multiple embryo question. At the end of this, there's a multiple embryo.
So 1 second. Oh, I didn't know you were asking. I thought you were asking about the story at the beginning of the case. Okay, so the case study we had at the beginning, we're gonna have to go a few minutes over. The case study, not long, 5 minutes. The case study we had at the beginning, where Ruchami, in this fictional story where Ruchami's life was in danger, obviously everyone would say that abortion is allowed, right? Question is if halacha mandates abortion in that case. So there was a real case scenario similar to this that's addressed by Rabbi Moshe Sternbach, who's still alive in Jerusalem today. Let's see what he says in text 10. When the doctors are not clear about the degree of danger the pregnancy poses to the mother, and the risk appears to be at a level of 50% or less, we rule that the abortion is allowed. However, if the mother insists that she does not want to proceed with an abortion and instead wishes to rely on God's mercy and kindness, we cannot stand in her way. She may choose such an approach, for there is room to argue that Maimonides would only permit abortion when a fetus is clearly a rodef that threatens its mother's life. Now, although we do not follow that position, nevertheless, if a mother insists on acting in accordance with this position, we cannot prevent her. She may choose to rely on God's mercy and kindness. In other words, we assume the mother's life is in danger. But when are you allowed to take the life of someone that's chasing someone else when you know their life is in danger? And here, there's no way to know 100% the mother's life is in danger. Because just because the mother's life is assumed to be in danger, not always does she end up dying. The proof is in the pudding. By contrast, when the doctor states that the danger is clear and the mother's chances of survival are minimal, in other words, the danger is real, it's not 50-50, it's real, it is then forbidden for the mother to choose to be lenient about her own life and place herself in such a serious danger. In such a scenario, we unequivocally instruct her that she is halachically obligated to undergo an abortion and that she may not endanger herself. In other words, going back to lesson 1, in lesson 1 we learned that if we have an obligation to seek out medical counsel, we have an obligation to be healthy, we have an obligation to look out for our life. And therefore, if there is, we cannot be lenient. We cannot say, I'll forfeit my life for something. You cannot want to do that. So if you're going to rescue someone, if I'm going to rescue Roger, and I think I might be able to do it, it's 50-50 because it's wavy waters, but I think I'm capable of doing it, then I can do it. But if I look at those waters and I say, there's no way I'm doing it, then then you start praying. And that will be more helpful because then you have a chance at least. So if there's a credible risk to the mother's life, in other words, there's more than 50-50. And by the way, in medical terms, there's no such thing as 51-49. It's usually 40-60. Or 50-50, but it's never 51-49. So I mean, in medical terms, they never use those in medical statistics. They don't do that unless there's numbers you're basing it off studies from the past. But if you're looking at chances, they'll never say 49-51. It's 50-50 or 40-60. usually 46. So if there's, so he makes room for the mother's choice. He says the mother does have choice, but limits it. She has choice when the outcome can go either way. But if the outcome is looking more like her life is in danger, she's not allowed to do this. And it's always important to remember, as we stated in lesson 1, we are not looking for rights. Not looking. Judaism is not about rights. It's not my body, right? It's our obligation to God who gave us, who loaned us the body. And therefore, the sanctity of human life pervades throughout the course so far. However, here we see a scenario in which it's possible that there's a 9-month period, give or take, that might not be fully human life, and therefore the status of any potential harm can either be seen as harm to a human or just harm to the mother. And that's how many will see it. Rabbi Waldenberg will say, why isn't abortion ever allowed? In other words, he says abortion, he follows Rashi. So why am I not allowed to do abortion at will? If it's not killing, why am I not allowed to do it? The same reason you're not allowed to do any operation at will. According to Jewish law, you're not just allowed to go cutting yourself for no reason. There has to be a real danger. So as long as there's no real danger, there's no permission to go in and that's right. That's something we decided at the beginning we're not going to touch because it's not discussed in this lesson. But that's why tattoos are forbidden. That's why a tattoo is forbidden. Because a tattoo, now people mistakenly think you get a tattoo, you can't be buried in a Jewish cemetery. Tattoo is no worse than eating a cheeseburger, right? They're both prohibitions. But so you still be buried in a Jewish cemetery. But what's wrong? It doesn't say in the Torah not to get a tattoo. It does say about performing cutting yourself that has to do with idolatrous ways. But just a regular tattoo, what's the problem with that? What's wrong with that? Because you're invading property that's not yours. Like we discussed in lesson 1, right? Even paintball shooting would be, according to many, forbidden because you're hurting yourself. You're not allowed to just hurt yourself. There has to be a valid reason. Now, most medical procedures can lead to death if left untreated, and therefore almost every medical operation or procedure is permitted because you're saving a life. You're potentially saving a life in the long run. So if abortion is necessary for that reason, it would be the same as a gallbladder surgery or whatever. I don't know if they still do that today. If they still need to do surgery, whatever you need to do surgery for, that would be permitted. But just to do it because I don't want it or because I want to, that I can't do. Yeah.
Executed the murders or that to be buried in the Jewish cemetery.
An after-class question.
Yes, I believe so. I believe so because the death penalty was the tshuva, was the repentance. The death penalty was the atonement. No, it was the death penalty.
That's why I'm saying at this extreme, if he's allowed to be that, well, if that person's allowed to be buried.
Oh, but there are people that are not supposed to be buried. We'll talk about it soon. We'll conclude now because of time. Next week, we will talk about what happens after life. What am I obligated or forbidden to do with my body? Just a few quick announcements before we move on to the next question that's in the appendix here. This Sunday, we are going to be having a barbecue at 5, I think, 5:30, something around that time. Everyone's invited. This is a makeup for Lag BaOmer. And then next, we're going to have a bonfire, or we're not going to have music. We'll have a cappella music. No live music. Only Lag BaOmer. Between Passover and Shavuos, we don't listen to live music. But we'll have a cappella music. Then Friday, not this Friday, but next Friday is First Fridays, I believe, in honor of your birthday. And then the following Tuesday night, in other words, next Tuesday night is the last Tuesday night of JLI. The following Tuesday night is Shavuos, the first night of Shavuos. For those who would like to join us 10:30 p.m., we'll have class Tuesday night, 10:30 p.m. all night, but Wednesday afternoon,
Tuesday into Wednesday.
Tuesday into Wednesday. So Tuesday night, instead of 7:30 class, 7 o'clock or 7:30, we're gonna have 10:30. And Wednesday, you have to look at the email, I think 5 or 5:30, we're going to have the reading of the Ten Commandments and a dairy meal. And everyone is invited. And that's that. I'm going to end the recording and take questions.
Roger starts right